So, welcome back to the Shelter Stories podcast. Today we are joined by one of our Australian members, Seb. So, welcome to the show. How have you been doing today, Seb?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very good. So let's just get straight into it. So, obviously you're in Australia, and a lot of us
Yeah,
either haven't been to Australia or don't go very often, because for us in like the Northern Hemisphere, it's pretty distant, pretty
yeah,
isolated location. So, just want to ask you, like, what are your personal opinions on the homelessness situation in Australia?
yeah. Well, what I think's interesting about homelessness in Australia is that it's pretty distinct from countries, especially the UK, because one of the most highly affected communities of homelessness are our indigenous population. So that can be Torres Strait Islanders or just Aboriginal members of the community. Then also it's increasingly been working families, women who have suffered from domestic violence, and it's also been increased due to the cost of living crisis in Australia, which makes it very difficult for a lot of families, especially migrant communities, when they're trying to settle into Australia. So yeah, I think when looking at Australia and its homelessness issue, I think it's a great perspective to have when tackling the issue because yeah, it's just a good comparison with other countries.
Yeah. So do the Aboriginals have any like, government protection or anything? Because I know in the US that recently they've been trying to give them more protection. Um,
Yeah.
so they have that in Australia.
Yeah, so especially since like the 90s and the 2000s, governments have been increasing their efforts to, protect Aboriginal members of the community because obviously, as you could probably guess, they faced systemic violence, racism, oppression for, hundreds of years since colonizers have come to Australia. So yeah, a lot of governments have been creating schemes for them, such as education schemes. They have different scores to get into universities to increase the uptake, cheaper hospital bills, like for dental care, for example. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of efforts to help, rid them of oppression, which, their families and communities have faced for centuries now.
Um, and moving on to another topic. So what does like the general Australian public think about it? I mean, do the different political parties have different opinions on it?
Yeah.
And um, do you feel people also fall into this like assumptions or generalization of this whole homelessness situation? Like they might think that like, oh, it's just because they like wasted all their money, or they assume that it's because of drugs.
Yeah.
Do you think people in Australia fall into that trap quite easily, or
Yeah, I think Australians are pretty divided, as it is with a lot of Western countries. We do have a pretty sharp difference between, a centre left and the centre right party. And, that can also be seen in terms of the outlook on the homelessness issue. Obviously, as you probably know, Australia has a very prolific gambling and alcohol scene, which means, when a lot of Australians think about homelessness, they're always going to associate it with, this Australian expectation almost that, they've been gambling or they've been drinking, they've been going to the footy or whatever it is. So, yeah, sadly, a lot of them face these very common stereotypes and then they're just assumed to be making poor choices, that type of thing. But then also a lot of Australians, especially with the rise of parties like the Green Party since the 70s, the outlook on um, homeless people has definitely changed. And yeah, there's been efforts to help bridge and close that divide, to provide more chances for homeless people in Australia.
yeah, I feel like something like that kind of roots into like education. And I think it's important that people from a young age are educated on that kind of thing and
Yeah.
are not they don't fall into the trap of just like stereotyping or getting a sense of stigma towards homeless people because it's not always so black and white that they just spend
Mm.
all their money or got hooked on drugs. So moving on to the Australian government now. So what do you think? Is there anything effective the government's doing, or and how's the housing policy situation like in Australia?
Yeah, so of course, as I mentioned before, with the cost of living being incredibly high, being comparable to London, New York, Hong Kong, there is an incredible demand for the government to make beneficial decisions or policies to help homeless people. In Sydney, it's very common for the Australian government to enact plans, such as normally building homes maybe around the 10,000 to 30,000 mark in different areas. Because of how the city is structured, a lot of those homes are being built near the west of Sydney, which has been creating a very large socioeconomic divide between, the west, where a lot more of these social houses are being built, and the east, near the beach, water, etc., which, is stereotyped for being where the rich type of live. But yeah, the government have been making a lot of efforts, but I think it's important to also realize that they haven't been sustainable enough to prevent the issue. So at my school, we've been participating in food runs around Parramatta, our local community, and there's always new people who haven't been getting the right assistance from the government. So they've been making progress in some areas, but it definitely isn't what it needs to be.
And just how bad is like have rents gotten in Australia? I mean, like how high is it
Yeah,
getting these
so
days?
this is a statistic we learned in class. The average kid graduating in our year, so 2026 leavers, won't be able to afford a home until they're 40 years old because of how insane the home prices have been getting. It's just been, yeah, especially within inflation, amongst other issues, large waves of um, legal migration and visas being given by the Australian government, and also foreign investment. It's been making it very difficult for, you know, housing to be at a affordable level.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a pretty general situation all around the world, especially the Western
Mm,
world, that it's the housing problems and high rent that's causing all this to happen.
yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, I think we'll wrap up today's podcast episode there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks Seb for joining, and
thank you.
yeah, stay tuned for the next one.